Hey y'all, I'm Sunny Shell, and this is Women Atheist Unload on Skeptic Haven. Today we're going to talk about the Laverne Police Department sex scandal. If you're a patron, you can hit a link to join us on the show. We're also monetized, so ask your super chat questions and don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get to it.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that.
Hey everyone. I'm so excited today. I get to host with Cindy Plaza. Hey Cindy.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's been a hot minute since we've been on together, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you. We also have Momma Deb. Hey, Momma Deb.
Hi.
And Bre, it's been so long.
Oh, yeah. How have you been since we last talked?
There's been so much that has happened. If any of you saw Bumblebee from Hive Science was on my show last night, so it's really good to see you again. And thank you for coming on today. And we have an interesting topic today, and I think what we'll do is show a news clip just to kind of get everybody knowing what we're talking about.
A 20-page report has been completed into sexual relationships at the Laverne Police Department. Some happening while officers were on duty and at work.
Doing something while you're at work, I mean, for everybody else who goes to work, we're held to that same standard.
Jerry Howell says he was in disbelief when first reading the report and wants changes from city leaders. The investigation, says Mayor Jason Cole, got the first tip about the relationships.
It's just bad. It's like a stain, I guess.
We requested an interview with Mayor Cole, but was told he was not willing to talk on camera. Instead, he released a statement saying, in part, "We will be retraining all of our employees in the rules, regulations, and expectations set forth by city leadership."
It'll be a wake-up call for Laverne, but also a wake-up call for our police department to take care of themselves.
Keith Bice says he would like to see the community step up and help oversee the police department.
Just a couple of bad apples does not make the whole bunch bad.
Police Chief Chip Davis talked about exactly that in his statement released this afternoon, saying in part, "We understand this will take time and diligence from our command staff and officers to repair the honor and integrity of our department."
All right. So
there's
who would
so
like
much wrong with this.
Yeah, it's my first thought is you're going to retrain police officers who are supposed to be enforcing the law, but you have to train them in the way that they're supposed to act at work. Oh, come on now. You're grown up. You knew what you were doing was wrong. Give me
it seems like the whole thing was like an above the law kind of situation. Like we can do this because we're the cops. There was part about they had a Girls Gone Wild themed hot tub party. Stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know if these people are doing this. It said they were doing at least some of this stuff on the clock. Why we're paying them to be doing other things? Why the people are paying them to do other things? But and the main focus and the way that this one is a lot more egalitarian approach to the story than I've seen elsewhere. This was probably about the most egalitarian approach to it I've seen so far. Most media releases about this situation blamed one individual that was participating in this, and they did not focus on or just tangentially focused on the other individuals involved and focused on just one person who obviously is dealing with some personal stuff that she has going on in her life. And I've met other young ladies who went down a similar path. I don't want to say this woman is a nymphomaniac or whatever the proper term for that is these days, but there's nothing wrong with that if she is, just that it was exploited by her coworkers, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that they all swore a duty to uphold the law. And if you cannot uphold the law, meaning you can't follow the regulations of your department in your personal life and in your on-duty life, then you have no business doing that. And it takes two to tango. And so there was never just one person involved. There was multiple people involved, multiple people doing multiple things on the clock, like Bre said. And the thing is, when you're on the clock, you're on the clock. Everybody knows that you're a grown up. Everybody knows that you can't be doing this kind of stuff. So,
Welcome to the adult world. Did they
Right?
think they were exempt? That's the problem.
Yeah.
People in power thinking they're exempt from the rules of society.
And you don't just see it in the police department. I mean, we've seen this in the military. Anytime where
Politicians.
anytime where there is, and I don't know if this may sound misogynistic in a sense, but and you guys can push back on me, but it feels to me that anytime that there is a place where there is male dominated, hyper alpha male-ish type places, women are either assaulted, or they are made to feel like if they do engage in something, then they're the scapegoat. It ends up being a negative against most women. Not to say that this happens to every woman. I know a lot of women cops and women military who don't ever experience this. So this is not a blanket statement. But when we see this, it tends to be in those male-dominated fields. What do you think?
I agree with what you just said, but I don't agree with what Momma Deb and Bre were saying earlier. I don't know, but I don't think it's that bad when people have sex at work. I really don't care. I mean, it's a situation where people are very close to each other at times. You mentioned the military and the police, and sometimes there are stressful moments. Sometimes that you just don't have any work to do, and it happened to me while I was in the army. Sometimes there's just some small periods, like an hour, 2 hours, where you just don't have anything specific to do. So I really don't care that they had sex in during hours of work. To me, that's not the issue. The issue is that it went public, and that's why people are so concerned about it, and the way when it went public. Because on social media, I actually removed 2 or 3 people from my friend lists on Facebook because I saw her face like every half hour.
Yeah.
And
I think we all agree that the misogyny towards do we even want to? I don't even know if you guys want to say her name and stuff on here. I don't want to add further, but I mean that's your discretion, of course. And I know you got some stuff to share, so if any of the content you're sharing,
I think the thing is like, I understand where you're coming from, Cindy, and I totally agree with you. The way that this is being played out in the media is wrong, because she's being pointed at to as the bad guy. And if you dig in and do a little research, you're going to find that there's some mental health issues going on with her. And one of the people who is involved, one of the other officers, is a supervisor, and it was his duty to report it, and he failed to report some actions that would have been flagged. But back to what you were saying, the main problem that I have with them having relations or what have you on the clock is that they're there. That's the 911 system for that area. And if you have to take the time to get dressed because you're engaging in certain activities while you're on the clock, that's my problem, is that what if factor. Because
that's why the firemen have poles, right? Because so they can get down faster.
Being somebody who worked in a 911 system, minutes do make a difference. 30 seconds can make a difference between life and death. So that's the main problem I have with it. And again, that's woulda, shoulda, coulda land, because I don't know. I don't think anything happened to that extent. But that is my main problem with it, is that you have you're responsible for responding to 911 calls of distress. You should be ready at all times. I mean, there were points where when I worked the system, you didn't even get to go inside and like sleep for the night. You had to sleep in your unit because you had to be able to go right away. So that's what concerns me about that.
Now that's a valid point. I think one thing that, as you guys are talking, I'm thinking about is some of the reports talked about not on the job, but outside of the office, about the Girls Gone Wild party, which that in itself, describing it that way is really ridiculous to me. What do we not have Boys Gone Wild? I mean, but a lot. So there were quite a few things that were not on the clock. That were outside of office hours. Those things that were on office hours, the way that they were described in most of the social media that I saw was referencing what she did, the sexual acts that she performed. And the sexual acts that the men performed wasn't actually detailed, just that they participated.
There's no sexual act that just she performed. That's bullshit. The way that they can present it like she's just performing, like she's doing that, but he's there doing that too. It's not absolutely he's not sitting at his desk doing his police work while she's underneath it. If you understand what I'm saying, it's not how it's happening.
It just highlights the like we've already said, the misogyny. But it's not just the media. It's like we talked about before, the social media, the comments, like Cindy was saying, that are so atrocious, even outside of social media. If you mention it to someone, they're like, oh yeah, that I have a couple of choice words about her. And it's like, wait a minute, what about him? These guys? What about these guys? And someone in the chat said it's just like in the Bible, the woman made these good men stray. That's kind of how it feels to me. And I mean, I would love to have some pushback.
Yeah, and there are several, like, I was going through the article that Wes sent me, and there are several, like, one of the officers showed up at her house, at the female officer's house, with another woman instigating a threesome. But that got, a bleep. It got, like, this big, and everything else was huge. And, frankly, I don't care what they do on their personal time. I don't care. You want to do that? Do that. That's your life.
That didn't need to be reported.
Have a great time.
The sex party, I guess. I thought that my understanding about that report was that it was happening on company time, the party. But
I don't know about the party, but I know that they mentioned two specific incidences with three different people happened on duty in the locker room.
Right.
But if you're going to have a party in a hot tub party or whatever, I don't care. What I care about is I care about the way things were handled, and the way it's described for one of those parties, the hot tub party, in fact, is that not that she took off her top, she lost her top, and she wasn't drinking vodka. They were pouring vodka down her throat. I have a problem with that because that is not consensual at any way, shape, or form in my book.
We've all been to a party where that was happening, right? Where there
was... But you need to, like, why didn't they point that out in the article? Why are they hanging everything on her? Because they absolutely did not have consent to do the things they did, because she was, if you're pouring vodka down somebody's throat, I don't give a credit if you're an alcoholic or not, you no longer can give consent in my book.
That's exactly right.
And if you lose your clothes, someone who cares about you is going to try to cover you up and get you out of there and not exploit you. Which, again, I don't know. I guess I had different information that I'd read about the alleged party than what you guys had heard, because I thought that I'd heard that it was on company time and all this, and that they weren't doing police work, that they were just coming in and having their big orgies, and no police work was getting done was part of the issue, is the way I understood it.
Yeah, I think that there was some of that, but they did also talk about off-duty stuff. They talked about they had to detail the fact that she had allegedly talked to her husband about engaging in the swinging lifestyle. Why is that relevant? Who cares what she told her husband? And Momma Deb, the one that you were describing about them coming over to her house. First of all, they were at her house. How is it anybody's business?
Nobody's.
And the other woman was the other guy's wife. Very, very little was said about that. That was a consensual relationship off the clock. What does that have to do with anything?
Right. And the rest of
there-
it's all just her relationship with her husband, and that's nobody's fucking business but those two people.
Absolutely.
If she broke her trust of consent with him, that's between those two people for them to sort out between themselves, and he gets to decide how he handles it. Right now, it sounds like he's like, no, I wasn't okay with this, but I am going to stand by her. She's dealing with this, and I think he's the one that's kind of presenting the case that she might have some stuff going on.
And they knew. She absolutely, Bre, they knew. Several of these officers knew that she had mental health problems because, like I talked about a little bit earlier, she unloaded her firearm arm and put it up to her head and dry fired it just so she could hear the sound of it. You don't do that unless you have something mentally going on. You just don't. Yeah. And the bigger problem is that the officer who witnessed this is considered a supervisor, and he failed to report that act. Nobody's talking about that. He should have been, that's a fireable offense. Okay. She should have been put on leave for that act alone, just that. And he should have been
evaluation anyway.
Yes. Well, they place him on leave. That's the standard, is they place him on leave for evaluation. Mm-hmm. It's paid leave, but that's anyway, he didn't report it. And then he also didn't, all of the officers lied about what was going on. When they were asked about it. So that's why they're being charged with obstruction in this case. But again, back to what you were saying, things happening consensually. The media has such a horrible habit of, let me find the smallest thing that I can blow out of proportion so I can sway people's way of thinking. Okay. Yeah. In society, swinging or polyamory, it's becoming more acceptable, but it's still not. So what do? They're gonna make her out to be the bad guy because she's the woman. She's, what have you, and they're gonna focus on something that's nobody's damn business, and that is the fact that she wants that swinger lifestyle. Because now they put her in a light where people are like, oh, she's a loose woman. Oh, this is why this happened. I got news. They're all loose. If you want to define it, they're all freaking loose. Okay, all of them are doing this thing, and it's just. Like we talked about before, it's really disturbing that she is being put there as the front person, and in actuality, it should be a shared thing. Well,
this brings up some things that we see in everyday life. There's a reason that women don't come forward when they are victims of the word we can't use, non-consensual sexual relations that are of the violent nature. Because oftentimes they are made to, their entire life is scrutinized. Did they have consensual sex before this? What were they wearing? Where were they at? What is their past behaviors? And even though the allegations in the police reports aren't saying anything about non-consensual, even though we could see it ourselves in some of the instances, that's not what is being alleged here. They're still doing the same thing. They're still looking at what she has done. What is her? It's the same exact thing that we see time and time again. Women are supposed to, are conditioned to not be sexual creatures. Yeah. Where we can't. We were talking about it behind stage, actually, about the difficulty for women to accept compliments. If we can't accept compliments, how in the world are we supposed to accept sexual advances or handle those types of things? And then if something negative does happen, then we just can't win for losing. But guess what? We are sexual beings. We enjoy sex. We talk about sex. We objectify men sometimes. We objectify other women sometimes. We are human beings, just like everybody else. And we should not be held to some intense scrutiny when it comes to sex. It's just ridiculous.
Can I get a chance just real quick to push back on Cindy? Because I don't think we've ever got to disagree about anything and have an argument between the two of us about the sex on the clock thing.
Sure, go ahead.
Absolutely. Okay, so the notion that we all want to have a safe and comfortable workplace is, I think we can all agree on that. That should be it's part of any contract where you work. You want to make sure that you feel safe and comfortable in the environment. So that someone reported that this stuff was going on, that there was a conduct report enough that there was an investigation to overturn all this, makes me think that somebody was very uncomfortable with the way that these people were carrying about their sexual activities. They weren't doing it like, oh, let's go park our police cars out on an old dirt road and hop in the back seat for a quick romp. There was stuff going on, multiple parties involved. It was affecting the workplace and it's affecting the performance of that. And they were in emergency services, as Momma Deb says. I don't care what work you're doing, if your conduct, sexual conduct explicitly, is disruptive to your coworkers to the point where they're not comfortable with the work that they're reporting you to, HR or whatever. This wouldn't be HR, but another company, it would have been HR. This would have been reported through. At that point, yes, your conduct you should be held accountable for that conduct that you are doing in the workplace.
You,
Sure.
as someone who is an employer and writes policy, it's in most policies that you are not. Now, I don't know if it was in that policy, but I would assume that it is. I think that would be a kind of an educated guess that it's written in policy and that there's specific consequences if that behavior is found. I mean, it could be as simple as right now there's a discussion in my field and related fields about just having TikTok on your phone. If that's becoming a policy. And so, it can be for something like that. When you look at the strata of things that can be in policy, engaging in sexual acts on the clock would probably rank as one.
Well, what they did in their personal lives off the clock, I don't give a fuck. And I think the media should get the fuck out of their personal lives and let them deal with it themselves. It's what they did on the clock that should matter.
Agreed 100%. If I may, can I address something that Kat put up in the chat?
Sure, yes. Let me see if I can find it, and we go ahead. There.
Yeah, that's the one right there. The thing that gets when I was doing the reading of the article that was sent to me, one of the male officers, absolutely has a history of intimidating other people in his workplace. He was reported for choking an office assistant, having his hands around her throat, and they said, he's like, oh, it was playing. That's not playing. That is hostile work environment, like Dan said. And you see a little blip here. You don't see any big blown up thing about that. That's a problem. Because
there was more going on.
Yes, there's much more going on in the workplace than what they're giving credit to. But honestly, I mean, it's like sex sells, right? So like everything has to be made sexual. So they exploit that one part of the story instead of focusing on what they should be focusing on, which is creating a safer place for people to work and getting people the help that they need. That's what should be the focus here. Nothing else.
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Let me ask you guys this, because I want to go back to Cindy, because she has everybody's like, no, we don't agree with you. But what do you think about if someone is technically on the clock, but they go on break, and then maybe they go off of the premises?
Property?
Yeah. So what do you guys
I do that. So I'm okay with it. Yeah. Afternoon delight is what you call that. And it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Make sure you spray something on yourself when you come back, though. So now
I can't get that song out of my mind.
Lovely.
I think that there are several different problems here. And as Momma Deb said, I think they should be identified and talked about individually. First, there's what Bre said about the environment, working environment, and I totally agree with that. If they had their relationships in places where other people could come in and knew that there was something going on, then definitely yes, it shouldn't happen. But I don't know how it went in these specific cases. but sometimes there are empty offices, or places where no one goes. So we don't know if there was, well, at least I don't know if there was any instances in which this was the case. Then there's the emergency issue, where I totally agree with Momma Deb as well. If they were supposed to be reacting like instantly because of an emergency, then this definitely shouldn't happen. Regarding the company policies, maybe it's a difference in culture, because the U.S. culture is much more Puritan than us in Europe. But yeah, our policies at work just say that we have to behave properly. And again, if you go into the attic and have a special time with a coworker, I really don't care, unless it does create a hostile workplace, or it affects what you're supposed to do. If you have a deadline in 6 hours, and you're not done, and you go do those things, then yes, you should be held accountable. But other than that,
What if you have to go to a company barbecue every spring and see that person's spouse, though? I don't, and yeah, that's
well, that's what you said earlier. It's your business with this person. It's personal. That's
well, I've been in that situation where I caught somebody cheating on their spouse before, and I was friends with the person, and I had to try to figure out. And telling them is not the right answer. I come to find out, but not telling them can't be the right answer either.
Yeah, that's a tough
Keeping
one.
it from them can't be the right answer. So
I think that's if I can answer, I'm sorry, a couple things. So Cindy, the specific things that they mentioned in the article I read is that those particular acts took place in a common locker room. So in a locker room where anybody could walk in, anybody could have seen it. So it wasn't like it was something that was private. And as far as the break is concerned, if you're clocked out and nobody's going to bother you, go do your thing. Whatever it is, go do it. Because there's not that, you're not going to affect what the situation that I brought up earlier. But I don't know many police forces that let people know that allow that kind of breaks. They don't. If you go, I'm going to have dinner, you don't always get dinner, depending on if the 911 system is busy.
So I want to go back really quickly to Cindy's comment. You had, because I was thinking it and you brought it up, and I was like, yes. So you talked about the kind of puritanical culture that the U.S. has in particular. The three of us are in the U.S., and this occurred in the U.S. Has there been anything like this that you've seen in Europe, and how is it handled differently, or do you know? I'm just curious about that cultural issue, because I think we are looking at it through an American perspective.
Yeah, we were raised very uptight.
We really are. We are so, and we're getting worse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think France and Belgium would behave slightly differently. I don't recall any case either in the police or the military where things like this were made public. But I suspect that the media would behave relatively similarly in France, maybe less so in Belgium. But yeah, it probably happens. That's for sure. Maybe the one of the main differences is that in Europe, police doesn't feel as entitled as it is in the US, and as above power and above everything. our police officers, they don't have this feeling here, and I think that plays a role in these kind of situations.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it. We have one question from the audience I want to take really quickly. Has the woman seriously been diagnosed or just a part of the smear campaign? And I think that's really an interesting question, because on the one hand, it could be part of a campaign smear. I'm sorry, smear campaign. But on the other hand, it could explain and almost not exonerate, but at least explain some of the behaviors and help her. So what do you guys think about that?
Again, I thought that this was part of her defense and her position that she was saying. So if it's something other people are saying about her, then I misunderstood the information I read. So
I think that Bre is right. If it is actually her coming out saying, hey, I have these mental health problems. Again, when I said she obviously has mental health problems, is just from her behavior that I have managed to pull that together. And again, I that's like my thing. I really, because I have mental health problems myself, and that's what I do is I explore different mental health problems. I really think that it's nobody's effing business, because that is her medical history, and it should not be put on display for the public to see. Because unless she did it herself, I think that they are absolutely in the wrong for putting that out there.
Yeah, and Sunny, you said, is there a way that any mental issue could explain what happened? I'm not sure we should try to explain it ourselves. I mean, maybe she should, if she thinks she needs to, but again, as Momma Deb said, it's her personal life, and the fact that we say this explains her behavior, that means that we think that this behavior needs to be explained.
Good point.
And I don't think it does. I'm not sure it does.
Well, the putting the gun to her head thing's kind of concerning.
Yes.
For someone working on our police force, for that to be a behavior that they were engaging in, but for this to be the thing that they actually get charged with is a problem.
Yeah. And that was just literally a blip, and it wasn't even a blip about her. It was a blip about another officer had witnessed this, and he should have reported it. So it just, again, I don't know why they thought it was necessary. I honestly just hope that she gets the help that she needs as far as that particular act is concerned, because that's very concerning for me. The other stuff, I mean, I don't know. I'm not one to judge, because I think that sex is a great thing, and I do it as often as I can, even at my age. So, I mean, I'm having such a hard time with the fact that they thought this was okay. And it goes back to what Cindy says. I think that they thought that they were above it. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm the police. What difference does it make? I'm not going to make a difference. I can't get in trouble for this, but I mean, my goodness, you're a grown up. You have to know that this is not the appropriate time and place for me doing this kind of stuff, in the locker room at work. So.
Right. Yeah. I tend to agree with you. And it could be a cultural thing, but even if it is a cultural thing, we have to look at that. And, in our culture, you don't do those things in the workplace. And I think we all know that. And it's not that sex is a bad thing when we're looking at it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. It's that, we have certain standards for how we think that people should behave on the clock, and what behavior that they are exhibiting, to other people in the workplace, or if you're on the clock but out in the community, you're kind of a representative of especially if you're in law enforcement or something that's very that people can look at you and say, oh, you're a police officer because you're on the clock, which means you're in uniform. All of those type of things. So there are, I think, while that may not necessarily exonerate the media, and I don't think it does. It does explain, we need to have certain standards, and I think the problem is we haven't had very good standards for we have had standards for law enforcement. Law enforcement itself has not had very good standards for themselves.
Yes.
And so when you see this, it's like, oh, here we go again. Law enforcement thinks that they can do this type of thing and the rest of us can't. I would be fired immediately if I did something like this. And so my concern is that she was immediately, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that she was fired immediately. It took a while for anyone else to be fired. And some are still not fired. Only a few
some are suspended. That's right. Yeah.
And from my understanding, it was only because they lied when they were interrogated. I don't even know if that's the right word. They were questioned. Yeah. So that right there is a double standard.
Oh, absolutely. And like people have been saying, the police department has a history of double standards. You got to make sure you can do the job, or it really has right there. Exactly. Little off the topic, but like when women started getting into the police force and realizing that they could become police officers when they were allowed, they were literally made to run up and down the street in front of male officers to make sure that their breasts did not jiggle too much and not allow them to run. That is the way this standard started. So there's so many things. We've come so far, but yet here we are still saying, oh, this female officer. Yeah, okay. But those male officers, this should not be her. It should be they. It absolutely 100% should be a they situation.
Right. And along those lines, one picture that I showed Wes yesterday was of the female officer and the male officer. His face was pixelated out and her face was shown. Why? Why was that done? To me, that's blatant sexism.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you're gonna, like the old saying, if you're gonna do the crime, you got to pay for the time. Well, that means your face gets out there. I don't give a crap if he's married and you're protecting him because he's some, I don't know, a pastor in a church or whatever the reason they think that they should be protecting them. No, all protection goes out the window when you commit those kind of things. You do those kind of things. You share it. If she's going to be put out there for the media, they should be put out there for the media to see as well, or to exploit, I should say.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I was thinking about one thing. Tell me what you guys think about this. I feel like this is something that we see kind of propagated from a very young age. Because you think about girls in school, girls are not supposed to wear spaghetti straps. And this is an American thing. Let me state that. There are serious dress codes for women, or for girls, for young girls, whereas boys don't have the same thing.
No, exactly.
But it's like we set that up. We set that up from a young age. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's that reminds me of, it's so funny that because it's totally out of context for me. That reminds me of the first time I had Dr. Josh Bowen on my show, and that was one of the things he talked about was the kids having to have their fingertips down a certain distance, and he asked the school, he's like, why would that be the rule? And she's like, well, we don't want the boys to be distracted by the girls with their shorts too shorter, their shoulders exposed. And instead of policing what the girls are wearing, how about policing how the boys deal with it, how the boys handle themselves? Because you can stop that in school, but you're gonna take your kids gonna go to the pool, they're gonna go to the beach, they're gonna see shoulders and thighs, and they're gonna have to learn to deal with that on their own, and withholding the opportunity to learn to socialize and deal with that and understand the consequences of misbehaving towards things like that is an important part of their development. If they don't learn it when they're in school age, when are they going to learn it? And not giving them that opportunity is not the win you think it is, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that even starting with that, the dress code, it teaches boys that they do not have to be accountable for their thoughts. Therefore, they are not accountable for their actions. And yeah, I'm sorry, but my daughter's not going to swelter in heat just because your son can't control what he's thinking about, her shoulders. That just
It doesn't even
makes
matter
no sense. Yeah.
what he's thinking about.
I don't give a crap, right?
Yeah.
Because you're there to learn. You're not there to sexualize people, which again, I realize I'm being unrealistic because it's a natural part of human growth and that's something that happens. But you shouldn't make one gender pay the price for another gender's thoughts or actions. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yes, we are all sexual creatures, and when kids start understanding the differences, that they see among each other, they're going to be curious, and they're they're going to notice things. What Bre said was very important, I think, because you teach our boys from that age. Yes, a girl is pretty, or yeah, girls have these things that you don't have, or you have these things that they don't have, and here's how you behave. You don't do that. You may, it's just like if you see a child that is exposing themselves just because it's like, hey, look what I got down here. You just say, hey, that's your thing. You go in your room. You don't share it with everybody. You just go in your room and take care of that. You can look at it all you want in your room. Not everybody needs to be seeing that. You do the same thing. You do the same thing with kids in the school. You look, but you don't touch. Just because a girl is showing her shoulders doesn't mean you go over and mess with her. I mean, what message are we sending to our kids if girls are constantly being, basically it's the adults sexualizing the kids, really.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Grooming the kids.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, Cindy, absolutely. They are grooming. I mean, but again, I don't know if this is just in America, but we are horrible at that. I mean, look at the shows like Toddles and Tiaras. They're sexualizing our little girls, putting them in these fancy little things, and even putting butt pads on them so they have more of a pop in their butt. What? These are babies.
That's illegal in some European countries like France and Belgium. It's illegal. You can do those shows here.
We have a comment. I want to share this really quickly. This is a really interesting comment. I'm not trying to be overly critical, but this discussion would be well served by the inclusion of an expert in law enforcement culture and or a former officer, perhaps female. Numerous misunderstandings. I think that's a really interesting comment. What do you guys think about that? I have some thoughts, but I really want to hear what you guys think first.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, having someone who is actually experienced in this line of work and stuff. Yeah, I think that'd be
I
great.
Agree. I agree that this would be a great thing. We could have a female officer, come in and talk about this, because there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that we do not know about.
More context would be great.
Yeah, it always is. I'm wondering though, I've always been told by my police officer friends that there's a good old boys club or a blue club for the in the police department. So does that have something to do with it? I mean, is that one of the reasons that things didn't get talked about or moved around the way it should? But then again, I don't know. I mean, is that the reason that she got hung out to dry also? So I'm kind of torn on that whole thought process, but I agree that I think a female officer would be a great perspective.
I agree. So for me, I am not an expert at all. I've never worked as a law enforcement officer, but I have worked with law enforcement very closely for almost 15 years. And I work with, and I have to be really careful because I don't really want to give too much away about my personal life. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is, and I have said on the shows before that I do work with child abuse victims. And so I have worked very closely with law enforcement officers, both male and female. And the female officers that I've worked with have shared with me that it's very difficult for them, that it has always been very difficult for them within that culture. One in particular is an excellent officer who it took 3 times as long for her to get promotions as her male counterparts. And she was directly told that it was because the person who gave the promotions was concerned that she would not get the same respect as a male counterpart in that role. So I'm not a police officer, but this was only a few years ago. So this is something that happens. Now, granted, I am in the South. That makes a difference. There are cultures, even across the United States. There's a different culture, say, here than in New York or in Philadelphia or in California. You know, there is a different culture. But I do think that, I mean, when I see this particular story that we're talking about, I think of the female officers that I work with, and it feels probably a little more personal because of that. And I probably should remember that and remove that bias. But at the same time, it's there, and it's good to acknowledge that. And I think that comment was extremely important because all of us come to it with our own perspectives and our own biases. And you know, my law enforcement friend is not here telling her story. I'm relaying it. So it's hearsay. It's an interesting.
Yeah, you all have biases. I don't, but everybody else. I have my biases against the police force too. I've not always had a good relationship with how they handle things, especially with youths. In my area, some of the ways that they handle youths in small towns. I've had listened to John Maddox over there on Logical, Probable, Plausible, talking about how when he was a kid that when you messed up, the cops caught you doing something, vandalism or whatever, that the cops took you out and roughed you up, and that was, and when I was a kid, they still thought that the cops still thought that was okay to do. And I was a very shy, I wouldn't say shy, I was very timid. And the cops were overly aggressive to try to scare me straight for whatever I was doing, spray painting a wall or some crap, but just juvenile delinquent stuff. And that it was okay culturally for the police force to physically harass and rough up. I mean, it wasn't like they weren't like hitting us with their billy clubs. They hammer you against the wall pretty good and maybe put you on the ground or put you over the hood of their car, just rough you up and make you feel like you're getting arrested, even though they wouldn't be able to arrest you under normal circumstances. They're just trying to scare you. So I have my own personal experience with cops that make me have a bias towards them and make me feel scared when I see them, regardless of what they're supposed to be. I naturally just have a fear of them.
Yeah, I have such a problem with my own feelings about the police because, like I said, I do work so closely with them, and I see the side that is actually very positive. You know, when they're engaging with a child who they've walked into a home and there's a child who has been horrifically abused, and they're coming there to help that child, and they're coming to our center to try to get this child help. So I see that side of it. I see the police that have done some really good work, and at the same time, I see police that haven't done so great, and I see the attitudes that some people in law enforcement that I work with have, and it's very difficult for me in that center part. You know what I'm saying? Where I have to put myself most of the time aside for the work that I'm doing, if that makes any sense. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. I don't need to go off on a tangent.
It makes total sense, Sonny, because like, given what I've done in the past and what have you, I've seen something happen. There's this phenomenon that happens with people who are like doctors, paramedics, cops, all of that. They develop something that we call God-itis. Okay. When I say we, as people who've worked in that industry, they start to believe their ego inflates because of the things that they can do. And then they start to believe it. And they start to believe that they're above the law. And that comes back to what this subject and the fact that I really honestly believe that they believed that what they were doing was fine because they're above the law and they're not going to have any consequences of it. And it's so hard because you have to see there are good cops out there. There are always going to be good cops out there, but there are also bad ones. It's always the bad ones that make the news. It's always the bad ones that give the good ones a good a bad name. You know, like what was the guy who was saying in the news thing you played? Oh, a couple of bad apples doesn't ruin the bunch. You know, but unfortunately, it's going to ruin this bunch for a long time in the community because people are going to doubt their ability to deal with things because of this whole scandal.
Yeah, there's also something I heard in the video was played at the beginning that struck me. It's the idea that because those cops behaved in the way they did, the entire city has to straighten up. That's a concept that's totally alien to me. I don't see how you make the connection to from those people behave like this, and so we need to clean up the city. Where does that come from?
Honestly, Cindy, I think it comes from, in my opinion anyway, I think it comes out that that they're assuming now that just because these 4 or 5 officers or whatever, however many there were, those officers, everybody's doing what those officers did, and they're going to have to clean up, and they're going to have to the community is going to have to learn to trust the entire police force again, which I think is wrong because there are, again, like I said, there are totally good people out there, good cops out there who are not behaving in this manner and are doing the right things. And for them to pay the price for bad cops' behaviors is a little bit frustrating for me. You know, I'm like, you didn't do anything wrong, but how, as a community member, do you know that the cop responding to your emergency or your situation is one of the good guys, not one of the bad guys? I think that's a fear that community is going to have for a while.
Well, I think that's a big problem across the board, across the United States. The problem is that it's not very often that, hold on, let me see this. Let me rephrase that. At least the public perception, because I don't know, I can't say what every police department does, but it's at least the public perception that it's very rare that the police themselves. As someone who is, like I said, an employer who is in a field where no one is mandated to utilize our services, but we are mandated to have everybody coming to the table. So we always have to be aware. So if anyone is upset about anything that someone on my staff does or something that I've done or whatever, I have to be very forthright and come forward and say, listen, we acknowledge this and we're going to do everything we can to solve it. Or if a person is acted in a less than stellar way, I have to deal with it immediately. And I don't see the same thing from law enforcement. Now, granted, I mean, I want to say that I am only seeing what I am seeing. I don't see everything. None of us see everything. But it is a larger perception. And there are reasons that we feel that way as well. I mean, we have seen that it's very rare that law enforcement is not only prosecuted, but even brought up on charges at all. And then, if you say something about the general way of law enforcement, it's often taken as a personal, and then there's a pushback. And so nothing is really dealt with. It just feels like it's constantly pushed under the rug. Again, I could be wrong, but that's what I feel, what I see. And I've even seen it in the work that I have done. You know, when I see some of the not very ethical things being done, and it's looked at like it's not a big deal. And yet if I was to do it, or if someone in my agency was to do it, not only would they be in trouble, but I would be in trouble as their supervisor, as the person in charge.
Absolutely.
So I really do feel like there's a double standard there. And I think that's what we need to have, a bigger cleaning of the house all across the board. And at least in public perception. If they are doing that, then they need to make that more transparent so the rest of us know. Because
Agreed.
Right now we don't know that.
I agree 100%. And I'll share an experience that I had with that. Is that, like, I remember running on a call when I worked as a paramedic, and unfortunately this young lady had gotten the bejeebies beaten out of her by her significant other. And one cop walked in and took one look at her. He goes, "Did the perp make it to jail healthy?" And I went, "What kind of question is that?" But now looking back on it, if anybody else had been that and said that other than the cop, they would have been like, whoa, 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 don't take matters in your own hand. But a cop saying, "Did he make it healthy?" is an okay thing. So I think that those you're right. There's a double standard. I mean, look at it. I mean, in the last few years, thank heavens, I should say like last 10 to 15 years, we started to prosecute police officers for murder. And it should happen. They're not above the law. They enforce the law. It doesn't mean you're above the law, and it doesn't mean that you're allowed to do things just because you're a police officer. And it's unfortunate because they still do get away with it. But I think change is coming. At least I'm hoping change is coming, and it started, it will change, but maybe it's because I'm just hopeful. I don't know, but it's just very much, it's very distressing that police officers can get away with behavior that other people can't just because they are an officer.
Right, exactly, absolutely. Cindy, I don't know if you actually wanted to say something, but it kind of looked like you wanted to, so I wanted to give you a chance.
yeah, I was just going to say that this accountability issue and the militarization of the police are two very, very big issues that the U.S. needs to resolve. The accountability thing, there's an aspect of it that's very, very often not talked about, is the cost of it for the public. Every year, major cities pay billions in settlements for police misconduct. And where does those billions come from? From taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And so people should be more concerned about this, because it's their money that's going out there paying for cops who just shoot around and don't care what happens. So yeah, I think that needs to be said more often. But yeah, the accountability issue is something that's, again, very, very alien to us in Europe. I mean, this mentality just doesn't exist here. I mean, yeah, it probably exists in some few places, but legally they are prosecuted quite often. And in France, every time there is shooting involving a police officer, there is automatically an investigation. It's automatic. It happens every time. So, yeah.
I would really love for that to happen here, because that is not the case here.
Absolutely not.
So yeah, Wes put up closing thoughts. So I'm going to give it to Momma Deb, because you were just about to say something.
I was. Well, I just think overall, I think that it needs to be more clarity in what's happening with our police and our police departments. Like, we won't know the investigation process in this they're saying they're investigating, but we will not know the exact process. And that's something that if you're tax funded, it should be public knowledge. So I think that that's something we need to do, is make it a little bit more of an open book so that we can see what's going on with it.
Absolutely. Bre, what is your final comments?
Yeah, I don't think that that this was handled well by the police force, but the more and more I look at these local like police forces that are self-contained and watch them bumble and fumble event after event, from riots to school shootings, and that they would have this much trouble handling something as simple as an inter-office sex scandal is ridiculous. It should not be national news. This woman's name should not be in everybody's mouth. There was no need for the media to try to humiliate her the way that it did. She did some things that a lot of people have done. Nobody's perfect. We've all done things that the media could sensationalize and smear us with in our lives. And watching it happen to this person, instead of letting her deal with it through her work, through her and through her personal relationships, that's where it should stop. There is definitely concern about the people above her that were allowing this to go on, that knew about it, and that's who we should focus on. We shouldn't even know her name. Just officers under the whatever, what would it be, a chief, I guess, that the officers under their supervision were doing this, and they're accountable for it. We shouldn't even be releasing the individual names. I mean, I don't know.
I want to say a non-religious amen to that. Cindy?
Yeah, I think not only the media, but social media as well. I think these kind of things, they trigger things in people that they're trying to hide, and every time something like this happens, these feelings, they just go out, and that's why we see so many men throwing mud because they don't have stones at this woman, and yeah, I think that's a cultural change that needs to happen.
Absolutely. So my final comment, I want to highlight something that Pat said. Even today, the average police officer receives approximately 20 weeks of training in the academy. You won't be able to hold law enforcement accountable until you professionalize the profession. I want to say that is 100% true. In my community, they go through what's called BLET, Basic Law Enforcement Training, and it's about 20 weeks. They go on tours of the different agencies around the community so they can see what the community has to offer. Once they get done with that, that's it. And I can tell you, because my nonprofit pays our local law enforcement, we pay for our local law enforcement to get training, because they don't get any additional training, or very little. If they go for something like they're going to look at online, I can't think of what it's called, but when they look for online predators, they go for special training for that. Or if they have certain things that they have to do. But by and large, officers come to me asking for training because they know that I'll do it. And one thing that I think that they need, that they're not getting, or they're only getting a face value of, is real sexual harassment, real diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Understanding what professional behavior is as far as a police officer goes. They should honestly be held to a little bit of a higher standard than we are, instead of being held on a pedestal. And so I agree absolutely with Pat, and I believe, Pat, that you said that you retired from law enforcement. I could be wrong, but I thought I saw that on there.
Pat did. Pat was formerly a police officer.
That's what I thought. So, that's coming from an expert right there. That's coming from someone who's been in the field. I think that a lot of times we have kids basically going out of high school and going to BLET, and then they're given a gun and said that they're in charge, that people have to respond to them, and you just need to listen to the police officers. And I think that can be a problem. So I think that's what we're seeing right now, I think, along with misogyny and sexism and so forth. So those are my final comments. Does anyone want to shout out anything else before we say good night?
Yes, just one sentence about what you just said about being given a gun. In the US, there is this culture that the gun makes the man, and I think that's central to this lack of training from officers. And as long as you don't get rid of this, you won't solve the issue.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to thank you all for coming on. I love talking with Bre. I love talking with Cindy. Momma Deb, you're fantastic. Thank you guys for everything. I want to thank all the people who were in chat, because y'all make it worthwhile. We do this for all of y'all. If you like this comment and you want to see more of it, remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, all those good things. Consider joining our Patreon, and you can get special perks. I want to thank our current patrons, Deneen Murphy, Dan D. Michael Wiseman, I'm putting their names together, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Deborah Grace, me, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. I want to thank our producers, Wes, Phil, and Kat, and our booking team, Wes, Raymond, Ellie, and Correa. Remember, we have other shows. We have The Sunny Spot, Secular Soapbox, Global Atheists, which Cindy is, that's her baby, and it's really wonderful. So y'all need to check that out. And The Bible Says What. So there's all kinds of stuff that y'all can enjoy from Skeptic Haven. Until next time, everyone, remember to think critically. Bye.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past and the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness.